Hello and welcome to the Life After Diets podcast. I'm Sarah Dosanjh, psychotherapist and author of the book, I Can't Stop Eating.
And I'm Stefanie Michele, binge recovery health coach. If you feel out of control around food, we get it because we've been there.
Thank you for joining our conversations about how to make peace with food and feel more comfortable in our bodies.
Now on to this week's episode. Before we begin, Sarah and I wanted to connect back with our audience. So we have decided to move forward with an event that would like to invite everybody to so that we can get to know each other on a more intimate level and talk about your questions in a live format. And I'm going to let Sarah let you know what that's going to look like.
So what we've come up with is an online community question and answer live Zoom. And we thought a really good time to do this would be just before the holidays, because that can be a really tricky time for people if you're struggling with food, with a lot of food anxiety and having to deal with families and social situations. So we gave it some thought and we came up with the idea of doing an online community live Q&A session on Zoom. And so this is going to be on the 19th of December, 2021. Of course, as you guys probably know, Stef and I are in different time zones. So in the UK, it's going to be 5 p.m. till 7 p.m. And Stef, do you want to fill us in with the US times?
Yeah, sure. So Eastern time, it's going to be noon to 2 p.m. Hopefully, wherever you are, you'll be able to join in and ask your questions or just listen to other people's questions and hear the answers and just get some community feeling around this time of year, and also to get some of your questions answered in a live back and forth way.
If you want to sign up to the event and come and meet us, then please go to the link below. We want to make sure that this is affordable and accessible for people who want to come. So there is an option to pay whatever you can afford. One of the reasons why we do what we do is because it's about community and it's about feeling less alone when you are struggling with these kinds of problems around food and body image. So bringing people together is what we are all about. We really look forward to meeting some of you in December. If you are listening to this in the future, please do look out for future events, because this is something that if this one goes well, I'm sure we will want to do more of them. Anyway, we've taken enough of your time. Let's just get on with the episode. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this week. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank everybody who has contacted us and given us feedback on this podcast. It has been extremely moving to hear what you guys are going through and how you guys are resonating with the podcast. And for me, it's what makes me want to continue doing these episodes. Hey, Stef?
I agree. I think this endeavor has become one of my favorite things to do because it's reaching so many people, and so many people are writing in saying that this has been really helpful and that they're looking forward to the episodes every week. So yeah, thank you to everyone, and also to you, Sarah, because I really have enjoyed hanging out with you and recording these too. So that makes the whole thing just, I'm loving this entire project.
Mm-hmm. Me too, Steph. And I kind of took you by surprise there with that preamble, because you were expecting us to go straight into the episode.
You totally threw me off.
I know, because we've had this conversation before about, do you do a preamble at the beginning of podcasts? And I've always been a bit anti it, because I think, particularly for new listeners to come in and listen to the hosts talking about their weeks, I can find it a bit off-putting as a new listener. But if people have any thoughts about how we start the podcast, whether we check in or just get straight into it, I would really like to know people's preferences.
Yeah, good question. Because I don't know, I kind of like listening to people chat about I like to hear the inner workings of their mind.
I think I do once I'm invested in the podcast. But I think if I'm going in as a new listener and I'm checking it out for the first time, to hear a couple of people I've not connected with yet ramble on for 5
just like
minutes.
Get to the point, ladies. Yeah.
So on that note, let's get to the point. Today, we're going to be looking at the question, how can I lose weight without dieting? This one was a request. We get a lot of requests to talk about weight and weight loss. And I know it's a big subject for many of you, and we will do our best to look at this question. But I would want to begin by saying, I don't know what's possible for each person at the individual level. So we can share perhaps a bit about our experience and some of our theories, but weight loss and bodies are so complex, and everybody's got a unique story, and For some people, it may be that each time you focus on weight loss, binge eating returns. And for other people, maybe not so much. Just to put you completely on the spot, because that's the
Yes.
advantage of being the introducer.
I'll remember that.
Can we, Steph, can we lose weight if we don't diet?
So this reminds me of just so many intuitive eating or binge recovery, eating disorder recovery accounts, I guess, on social media or even websites I've found where it's talked about, let's ditch diets and reject dieting and move into intuitive eating. And here's how you can do that and lose weight. And I think those accounts are very popular and those websites are very popular because that's what everyone wants. It's like, how could I have the best of both worlds? Can I reject dieting and like be free and lose weight? Because the lose weight part is still probably for many people still higher on the priority scale than the food freedom. And we've talked before about our recovery actually was only possible once that flipped and once the freedom around food and the mental anguish around food and the desire to heal from that was stronger than the desire for weight loss. And I believe that is the order in which this works. I feel like this is how I see it. We learn from a young age to, you know, quite potentially to have a very tumultuous relationship with food. We inherit these rules and beliefs that interrupt our ability to be intuitive with food. And then we try to build, to go on diets and to lose weight and to do all these things on top of this foundation that's a crumbled mess. And we can build that house, that structure on top of that foundation in all manner of beautiful looking ways or theories, whether it's keto or paleo or vegetarian or just portion control, whatever it is. But we're still building it on a foundation that is broken. And any attempt to lose weight on a broken foundation and to build that house on a broken foundation is going to, as far as my opinion of this, is going to fail eventually. Like it may stand for a little while and then the cracks will start to come and eventually the whole thing falls down. And so if weight loss is something you choose to pursue after healing from binge eating or healing from dieting and repairing that relationship with food, that's everyone's autonomous decision. And I tell my clients that all the time, that if you choose to pursue that after you make peace with food, that's something you get to experiment with that. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I can just give you my experiences and I can give you some information that might inform that decision. But ultimately, I feel like the job is to heal the relationship with food first. That has to come first. And then you can decide what to do with that. But that I don't believe that the pursuit of weight loss can coexist at the same time with binge or diet or eating disorder recovery. I think it will get in the way every single time. And that's a different conversation. I think when you're healing, no, I don't think that weight loss can be a goal.
I think a lot of people can see that because they see what happens when they focus on weight loss and they're struggling with binge eating. But what a lot of clients and people will ask me is, okay, so if I heal, then what happens? I think when it comes to letting go of weight loss or putting it on the back burner, that only seems to happen once someone has realized for themselves how it's driving their binge eating behaviors. It's okay hearing it from people like you or me or other people out there who are spreading this message. But until each person has a look themselves and goes, okay, what happens to my eating when I focus on weight loss? And I've noticed when I don't focus on weight loss, I'm binging less. Okay, at what point am I healed? At what point can I then make that decision? And they're trying to figure all this stuff out before they've had their healing part. And so there'll be people who'll say to me, I know I can never diet again. And that's so difficult, this idea of letting go of diets forever. I don't think you need to decide now what is forever. My instinct, my guess would be that for a lot of people, that would probably be forever, but no one's the same. And everybody's got a different experience when it comes to food. But it's as if we need to know. Sometimes people will say, okay, I can put weight loss on the back burner, but I need you to let me know when I'm allowed to return to it. And you said, I don't tell people that they can't, But the amount of times, and I'm the same, I don't tell people that I can't, but the amount of times people will say to me, I know you say I shouldn't lose weight. And I'm like, I never said you shouldn't. But it's interesting, that's what people hear. It's taken as a directive. And anything that's taken as a directive in this kind of work, I think is going to be problematic. It's got to be something that you want for yourself, because you want something more than what you're currently experiencing, or this cycle that you're currently stuck in.
I agree. And I think sometimes it's a readiness that's showing up there. I think there can be such a desire to want to heal the relationship with food and to stop dieting. I think that's valid and true. And I think that it's really hard. It's incredibly difficult to give that mission up, even when you have a very strong desire to heal your relationship with food. I know for myself, I attempted to heal my relationship with, well, I was always attempting to heal my relationship with food, but I truly felt like about 5 years ago, I tried to do this, and I felt like I was ready. I thought that I really was. There were a lot of things about me that had changed, and even my thinking that was more flexible, and I was willing to think differently in many ways. But I just couldn't conceive of a life in which I was not pursuing some kind of weight loss, because as I saw it, I was already over my target BMI, right? And I mean, BMI, I didn't know at the time that BMI was, it didn't matter. Maybe if I had known it, it wouldn't have even mattered, because I was not comfortable in my body. And so to accept that I wasn't going to be at least half and half pursuing both wasn't, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Now, of course, I had no support either, as far as like, I didn't have a coach at that time. I ended up having a body image coach that really helped me navigate this, but I didn't at the time. And so I didn't know what my options even really were. I only could rely on the fear of what gaining weight would mean. So I couldn't see beyond that fear. I think later, when I did have a body image coach and I started to learn more about body diversity and my genetic blueprint and weight set point, and for anyone unfamiliar with those terms, I'm referring to the idea that our bodies are not all designed to be a small size, the way that is pushed, that if you just work hard enough and, no excuses, and that if we just try hard enough, we'll lose the weight. I started to see that as maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not the case, because I've been fighting this my whole life, and my body just seems to want to be in this certain range. It's just where it seems to want to be, and maybe that's a thing. So that there's this idea that our bodies all have these diverse set points, and that some bodies are going to want to be larger than others, and that that's a healthy place for that body to be, that that's a place where that body finds homeostasis. When those concepts started to become real for me and I started to consider them, that was a place where I started to grow. And that was a place where I felt like it was safe to let the weight loss goal truly go on the back burner. And I still didn't even let it go entirely. I've talked before about my method of, I'm putting this away for a year. I'm going to revisit this in a year, because I still needed a backup plan. I wasn't willing to jump all the way, but I was willing to suspend it for a solid amount of time. And doing that led me to a place where, when I did heal my relationship with food, I felt I didn't want to jeopardize it. It was like, I'm gonna put it off another year, another year, and I'm gonna keep putting that off, because I'm just too. This is too good. I feel at peace with myself here, and maybe that's what's scary to people, is they're like, I don't want to get to the place where I'm willing to compromise on that, because it feels so important to me right now. And ultimately, again, this is a decision you can make, but I still think that weight loss, intentional weight loss, if you've got a history of disordered eating, you're going to be hard pressed to ever accomplish that in any long-term way without healing your relationship first anyway. And I think a lot of this is going to depend on body diversity.
Mm-hmm. There's a question of, how are you going to be eating on the other side of disordered eating? And when it comes to whether your weight's going to change or not, I think for me, there was this hope that when I stopped binge eating, the weight was just going to fall off me. That was the hope, right? And so a few times when that happened, it would be a little bit of weight that naturally came off, and then it would plateau. And at some point, I would feel like I was doing all this work for nothing. I think that weight loss can be possible, but I think there's several things that make it more likely. if you struggled with disordered eating. One of the things is around however it is that you're eating, would you be willing to eat like that for the rest of your life, even if your weight didn't change? Are you eating in a way because if you eat this way, you should be rewarded with weight loss? That, I think, is the problematic way of thinking that will keep leading you back into this disordered place with food. However, I do think there are ways where you can keep implementing self-care habits around food. How are you looking after yourself around food? Because it could be that your relationship with food has improved a lot, but there still might be a lot of emotional eating that doesn't sit well with your values. Not demonizing emotional eating. I do emotional eating sometimes. I think a lot of even celebratory eating at like events and things like that and holidays, that's a form of emotional eating,
Mhm.
right? It's about wanting to feel a certain way more than specifically about how you're feeding your body. Following on from the conversations we were having last week about the black and white and all or nothing thinking, that has to be managed, because otherwise any tiny change that you make with your food is not going to feel like enough. We're like, well, I made this change. Like, where's my reward? Where's my weight loss? And that's going to keep pulling you back into that old thinking. And this is going to be depending massively on where you're starting at as well. Because for some people, you're at a point where your body doesn't want to release any weight. And other people might be at a different point where their bodies would be happy to release some weight.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to be extremely careful in how I speak about this stuff. I have found every time I focused on losing weight, my binging and some compulsive eating starts coming back. That's been my experience. I've also had the experience where I'm not focusing on weight and my weight has come down naturally a bit because of how I've been taking care of myself. It's always going to depend, and there's always ways of looking and improving your relationship with food and how you're taking care of yourself with food. But if you start turning that into shoulds and you start doing that for the reward of weight loss, I think you'll keep being led back to the same place again.
Yeah, two things. One, taking care of yourself may, for some people, result in weight loss, and for some people, it may result in weight gain.
Mm.
So that's another caveat, is to not associate necessarily that taking care of yourself means that you will be rewarded with weight loss, because for some, it's the opposite. For me, it was. I gained weight in my recovery, but I was finally taking care of myself. And that's the way my body was like, thank you. That so much leveled out for me hormonally, mood wise, physically. This just was my body's way of saying, this is where we need to be. But also that for anyone who, how I think there's a question sometimes of, well, why can some people lose weight? How do they do that? And they seem to keep it off, and they don't binge. Why is that happening? And I think that's the place where sometimes we imagine, like, we'll heal a relationship with food, and then we'll be like those people who can somehow do that. And I think that that's just, there's so many ways of answering that question. But I think for many people who somehow lose weight with any amount of success. And by the way, we don't always know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know what someone is dealing with or how disordered their eating might be, no matter what's being presented to us. And we also don't know what the long-term effects, if you're seeing somebody who's having success this year on a certain plan. I see this all the time in my personal life. And then a couple of years later, everything's fallen apart. Um, but that there are some people who, number one, are just genetically programmed smaller. And so they're not necessarily fighting their biology to the degree that maybe you would be. I don't mean you, Sarah. I mean like anyone who has a higher set point than a very small person or a thin person. And that's a factor. And number two, the identity with that weight loss and the self-esteem that depends on that weight loss. I know the people in my life who have gone on some kind of diet, and they've never stayed on it for very long, but maybe they've lost some weight, and it just wasn't a thing for them in the same way that I always felt it would have been a thing for me. Like, they were happy to lose weight because I think we're trained to be, but they didn't depend on it solely. And I think the process of recovery for me, all of these years of being in this space, has what it's given me the most, as far as how my mentality has shifted about my desire to lose weight, is I've built my self-esteem in other areas. And so that is part of the reason why I feel not so compelled I don't feel that same pull of wanting to lose weight because my whole world doesn't depend on it anymore. And when your whole world and your whole identity depends on you losing weight or not, and your appearance as your worth, then that need is going to feel so much stronger. And what the healing process does is it builds up so many other parts of you, and it reveals more of your authentic self, and it helps you cultivate your creativity and these other parts of your life that were neglected for so long. And that in and of itself takes the pressure off of that need to lose weight and the not wanting to risk and compromising that in the pursuit of weight loss. If you can go back into that black and white mentality, I mean, if I were to go on a diet, I could see myself going back into black and white to some degree. I don't want to do that. I don't want to lose what I got.
Mhm. So I'm thinking now about the intention behind a food choice. So if you are making a choice because the intention is to lose weight, and that starts to influence your food choices again, that's going to pull you away from being in touch with your body and what's going on for you. It makes every food decision about bringing you closer to or further away from your goal of weight loss. And I think when you're back in that pattern again, that is going to be challenging. And I mean, I don't know how comfortable you are talking about your weight changes, so we can cut this if you.
No, I'm
Yeah.
open.
So when you started your recovery, your weight went up. Did you keep that recovery weight, or did your weight change then?
My weight went up significantly the first year,
Mhm.
significantly. And I was not, it's not like I was so happy. It wasn't like I was just like, it's okay. I feel better with food, so it's okay. It was hard. I could every day made the decision to continue with the recovery process. It was like a new decision every day. Um, and there were days where I was like, I don't know, maybe it would just be easier not to. But what happened was that I eventually, I guess I just got, I did come to a place of peace with the fact that it was happening. I worked on my body image. And over the next couple of years, my weight did come down. Um, Not intentionally and not down to where it started. So I landed somewhere in the middle. It's like I did this overshoot and I came back to the middle, which I'm not saying that as if that's the everyone's path, but that's what happened for me is that it did come down some and and it's stabilized here. And I would say that first year was just I gained a bunch and then it sort of like just was still fluctuating for a while. I stayed in that fluctuation pattern for quite some time. And even after my eating stabilized, I was still noticing that I was gaining very slowly over time. And I was like, what's going on? Is this just going to keep happening? Because my eating is stable, but my weight doesn't seem to be. It was almost like my body needed time to catch up. But it did suddenly land in a place and then it came back down a little bit and it stayed here and it feels good here. It feels like I don't have to, I don't even think it just stays where it is. It doesn't change too much in any direction, even if I'm eating less. Like in the summertime, I tend to eat a little bit less. I'm outside where I move more. In the winter, it's the opposite. It just sort of stays in this like little range.
Mhm.
Um, and that in and of itself stabilized me. I felt like when I felt consistent in general, I felt more willing to be okay with where I was. I'm like, okay, this is my home. This is where my body wants to live. And because I don't feel in flux all the time, mood wise, food wise, size wise, I feel I feel okay. I feel like me. I feel like this is more aligned with, I guess, where I am right now and where my body is right now. And that feels good. It does.
We just want to grab a moment of your time to let you know that we are now on YouTube. So if you can't wait for the next episode, we are going to be uploading the podcast onto our YouTube channel a day early. So please head over there and subscribe. We are Life After Diets Podcast on YouTube and on Instagram, and you can email the show lifeafterdietspodcast@gmail.com.
And if you're interested in working with me, Stefanie, I work with clients one-to-one, and I also am enrolling for a group program to work on intuitive eating foundations with a binge and emotional eating recovery lens. You can apply at www.iamstefaniemichele.com/application.
And if you want to connect with me, Sarah, I am the Binge Eating Therapist on Instagram and YouTube, and my website is thebingeeatingtherapist.com. Now let's get back to the episode. So I'm conscious that we've both then had the experience that our weight has come down through
Mm.
not dieting. So that I think I don't want to, definitely don't want to suggest that that's going to be the case for everybody. So touched on this in a previous episode, my relationship with food was much more permissive. I think you possibly did some more extreme restriction than I did. So for me, it it didn't go up in recovery. Each time I got into sort of some kind of recovered place, it balanced out or it started to go down. The problem was each time it started to go down, I became attached and
Yeah.
emotionally invested in that happening. And then I would end up overthinking and getting caught up with food again and go back. And that probably went on for like, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years probably, where I kept finding this place of balance. Then it would start coming down. Then I'd go, oh my goodness, I can do better. I can do better and get this to come
Yeah.
further down. And then I would end up binging and it would go back up again. So I was stuck in that place for a while. And it's almost, and this is my journey, so I'm going to say this from an my weight didn't start coming down naturally and peacefully until I cared so much less about the fact it was happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the moment I cared and became invested in that outcome,
Yeah.
it's problematic, really
Yeah.
problematic.
Yeah. And that's even for food decisions, because I noticed also that when I cared less about losing weight, I ate differently. Even in recovery, even though I'd made peace with food, and I wasn't actively controlling anything or judging anything, but still there's changes that seem to happen. Like I feel like I actually started choosing more nutritious foods when I stopped caring about I stopped really caring so much about that. It wasn't that I stopped caring. I mean, I think I'd let go of the caring. I think what happened was that I wasn't so upset about the fluctuation. Like, the fluctuation really, really bothered me. When I got to a place where I felt more like, okay, I feel somewhat more stable in mind and body. And so I feel like I can move on with my life in a little bit now. And then all of a sudden my eating became more aligned to like foods that give me energy. It wasn't like, I'm going to try this now, I'm going to keep it here now. It was just that, I don't know, it really frees up your decision-making process when nothing is hinging on the decision-making process.
Mhm.
It's just, it's interesting how that works in this backwards way. And I think we're always trying to get at it the other way around. But there truly is alignment that comes when you're aligned.
Yeah.
Like the food and the body they follow you.
Yeah. There was a sense for me in recovery where I was thinking, I can have that food tomorrow. I'm not sure if I want it today. I can have it tomorrow. And that was so different from the previous of I have to get rid of the food because I can't have it tomorrow. That was the bit of getting stuck in. There's always that when you're focused on that weight loss, there's always not only about this moment and what you're going to eat, but that anticipated restriction. And even getting to a point where I was like, it's not the end of the world if I binge. That's okay.
Yeah.
I can get myself back into balance. It's not going to turn into the mega binges
Yes.
that you speak about. It can be a one-off. Okay, what was going on? What do I understand about that? Something that really helped me afterwards as well in those kinds of binges was just running it through in my mind and playing the scenario out differently. At what point would I have intervened? At what point would I have wanted to make a different decision? Or, just
Mm.
was it okay that that was the decision I made then in that moment? That made a difference, because I think a lot of the time people binge, and after binging they think, right, I'm just not going to let myself do that again. What does that actually look like? Running it through in your mind, how would you have responded differently? Otherwise, in the same situation, you're going to react in the same way.
Yeah.
Slightly off topic, but worth throwing
No.
in.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of I don't know why it reminds me of this, but it does. I'm moving, like we're packing, and this past month has been very busy. It's been like every minute I've got stuff to do, weekends, all of it. So there's been less time and more doing. So I have been eating less by accident because I'm just been so busy, as this tends to happen when we get busy. And I'm very careful. I'm pretty intentional about eating every certain number of hours, because I know that my alarm system goes off when too much time goes by, as it will. But there's been times where I just haven't been as on top of it, and I've been busy to be distracted. So recently, this past week, I've been so hungry. so hungry, and I've been eating all my meals very more than normal, like all of them. And I watch it and I'm like, I know why. Because this entire month I've been sort of like bypassing some meals that I or not meals, but bypassing amounts that I probably would have in just in the name of like, I got to go here, I got to get this done. I have no attachment to the fact that I had been eating less. It wasn't on purpose. In fact, it was kind of annoying because I knew that it would, you know how this stuff catches up. And so when the hunger came this week and I watched myself eating more, my old mind would have been like, prepare. You're going into binge territory. You can't afford to do that. Like there would have been this like excitement of, oh no, this is going to make you gain weight. And you've just lost a couple of pounds, right? Like now you're going to gain it back. You better watch. And now it's like, yes, of course. I mean, it's like, this is totally okay with me. I don't have a meta binge that's ensuing or any kind of meta. It's not a meta binge because I'm not binging. I'm just eating more, but I'm not having any emotional eating, overeating in response to it because, uh, my weight's not attached to this. I'm not trying for anything. It's just the way that the natural ebb and flow of my body is, and I respect it. So it's like, yeah, okay. And in that acceptance of, yes, this is what happens and it's fine and this isn't a problem. I'm allowed to eat more now because I'm hungry for it. The acceptance of it itself moderates the effect of what would normally be judged and then turn into the meta whatever.
Mhm. So what would you say to listeners who do care? We're talking about caring less about weight loss, but there's going to be people listening to this going, well, that's okay for you two to say, I do care. I'm so uncomfortable. What would you want to say to those people?
So when I say I don't care, I mean I don't care that I'm eating more because I respect this cycle. I understand how this works. And to someone who cares, which was me, definitely for my entire life up until a few years ago, um, it was not a process of arriving at that place of not caring overnight or because I decided to. It was a literal process that I had to go through. So even if if I had been listening to this 5 years ago, it wouldn't have applied to me because I hadn't gone through the process yet. I think there's something intentional about the healing and the surrendering that happens in order to get to the place of being able to respect the way this works and to feel at peace with the way this works, and that moving through that in a way that takes time is the way to get to the place of not caring or not micromanaging and not feeling like you have to micromanage. I think that it's not a decision or a mental shift that you just make. It's a literal process that you go through to get to that place.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Certainly with the catastrophizing of overeating or that often led to binging. But I suppose bringing it back to weight and what that journey, well, what it might have looked like for us, we can't always presume to say we know what it's going to look like for somebody else. But also for somebody who may be in a larger body than you or I have ever existed in, listening to that and going, well, you guys could always fit in an airplane seat, or all of that. When you're in that place and that level of discomfort, what what is it you would want to say?
I think that's an important point because I've been plus size. I haven't been in a position where I'm not fitting in an airplane seat or I'm being openly ridiculed. Um, so I can't speak to the way that feels really. I can surmise, but I don't come from that experience. But I can imagine that it's harder to navigate than where it's a personal attachment to weight loss and maybe even an ego thing. But that in any case, the relationship with food has to be repaired no matter what. And if your body is naturally at a larger set point, that there's little we can do to change that intentionally, and that there might not be anything wrong with that. It's just that we've been made to believe that that's somehow bad with, we have the obesity epidemic, quote in quotes, because this is something that has been, it is, being in a larger body has been pathologized, and it's linked to all of these terrible health outcomes that may be more a result of of an industry that's trying to push drugs and anti-fatness. That's something that takes time to learn about and to wrap your head around and to come to terms with if you're somebody who has to deal with that day in and day out, and recognizing, like we've talked about before, that the onus is on the culture, not on you. This takes time. But I can also understand that there's people who feel that that's too much to deal with, and that that's not something that they want to try to lose weight, because it's just simply like it's very difficult. And that healing the relationship with food is still something that I would say has to come first, and that the potential for weight to increase as a result of weight cycling from dieting itself isn't it's a reality to know about and to open our minds to, because we've been taught that if we just try harder that we'll lose the weight, and then when we don't, when we end up weight cycling and going up and down and up and down, that this is can actually have a greater impact on our health. But it doesn't necessarily take away from the impact on the social experience of being in a larger body in this culture, and that that's not something that there is an antidote for.
Mhm. Well, one of the theories around set point weights is that, dieting, weight cycling increases your set point and makes your body biologically change to want to keep you at a higher weight. It's makes a lot of sense to some degree. I think for somebody in that position, I'm really interested in the worth part of it. So you've got these messages from society, you've got perhaps some practical challenges around existing in your body. And what are you making that mean about your worthiness as a person? And that's where I think a lot of the body positivity or pro fatness campaigns and connecting with other people out there who are existing in larger bodies and talking about this, and activism and fighting for rights, all those kinds of things, to at least be aware of and connected to
Yeah.
those communities, I think helps with that sense of worth, that sense of belonging, and this not being some kind of moral failing that your body is larger than society is telling you that it should be. Because if if that chasing of weight loss is coming from a place of just desperately wanting to feel like you are good enough, ay, 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 that just to me, just it hurts to to contemplate, for me to imagine what that is like, having known it on a smaller scale, but then to have the wider pressures upon you at the same time. It's even harder to find your own mind and to get to that place like, no, I am, I'm okay.
Yeah. Which I think speaks to the positive power, like the power of social media in a positive way, because these communities are available when we look, when we definitely have to look, but they're there, and we can connect to people all over the world now who are in that same position. I think navigating this without that is harder, I think. I mean, I guess we're also exposed to more judgment because of social media too. Maybe it's all relative, but it feels like there's more opportunities to connect with people and feel, because it comes down to feeling like we're wrong, or like, that someone doesn't we don't belong. Like that feeling is what's so difficult. And to find communities where you belong. I mean, there's other podcasts, Body Image with Brie, Fierce Fatty, and I know Secret Life of Emotional Eating has a community, a membership community. These are run by women in larger bodies who have found empowerment and self acceptance and are living that life. And if that's something that feels inaccessible, to have a person who leads a group and is there as an anchor every week of, this person embodies the things that I want for myself and it can be done. And there's a group of people doing this too with me. And that is a resource to heavily lean on in a recovery process. Or if you're someone who's battling that, I want to give up dieting, but I can't imagine how I could not want to lose weight because that makes me feel ostracized. It makes me feel alone to be in my body and to feel like that's not accepted by people. That this is a huge part. I would say it's what the most important part of maintaining recovery is having that community.
Mhm.
So I think when we ask the question, how do you lose weight if you're not dieting, is a misleading question because the pursuit of not dieting in and of itself implies that we are not trying to lose weight. Perhaps for anyone who has this question, that maybe there's something about not dieting that's still tied up in dieting and that it still feels like an endeavor. It still feels like a program or something you go and do in the way that you would go and do a diet that somehow is a promise of something. It's like the way that a diet is too, and when we diet, we're promised we'll feel confident and we'll gain accessibility and we'll gain prestige, and that's what you're after when you diet. In the same way that not dieting might feel like a lofty goal of freedom and, also confidence and not caring what other people think and not going along not being a people pleaser. That might be a goal, but that ultimately not dieting means those things and the surrender of that pursuit of weight loss, that's what it means. So to question what your definition of not dieting really is, and is it being seen as especially when we talk about intuitive eating, which can sometimes be looked at as a diet as well. um, what is the goal really? What is your goal in any of this? Is it to feel what, to and getting closer to what that desire is? What are you really seeking through all these things? um, that's the larger question, and then that becomes the value system by which you start moving through life rather than the value system being about, well, weight loss, because weight loss will bring me these things.
Mhm. I wonder if a common answer to that question would be, well, I want to be sort of just slightly eating in a bit of a deficit without really noticing. And then the weight just kind of comes off of me, but I'm not
Yeah.
really thinking about it. And I'm
Yeah,
just
sure.
naturally doing that.
That's a
That's
diet.
the answer, right?
Yeah.
Not if you're not thinking about it, Steph. If you're just naturally doing it,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not a diet, surely.
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 Except
Well, there's this,
maybe
well,
that's exactly the point. It
what are we
is.
saying that weight loss can only happen through some kind of energy deficit?
Oh,
Because that seems
probably.
to be what the science suggests, is that there needs to be less energy going in than the body is expending.
Well, yeah, yes, but not necessarily, because sometimes this has to do with metabolism too,
Which is
which isn't
still how much energy the body's expending.
yes, but not necessarily how much you're ingesting. So your metabolism could shift up or down with you eating the same amount of food, and then your weight would shift up and down. But yes, it has to do with the energy processing.
Mhm.
Um, but the intentional manipulation of that energy processing is 99% of the time, as far as I can tell, related. It's too attached. It's too attached to the outcome that is attached to your identity and our sense of worth. And because it's attached to that, it's 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 a train wreck. It's like it just can't stay on the track. And so, I don't know. I think for me, this whole thing is for anyone in any size that I've seen recover, and I have clients in larger bodies than me who I've seen this for, where the empowerment that comes from not dieting and not pursuing weight loss is its own reward.
Mhm.
It's part of the magic of this. And I know that sounds vague and like, okay, but it's true time and time again. It ends up being something that opens a door. When you stop focusing on weight loss, you get to focus on so many other things about yourself.
Mhm.
Um,
I have interacted with a few people who feel a bit like they've been hoodwinked by intuitive eating. So they've started the intuitive eating journey and their weight has continued to go up and up and up. And the people coaching them in intuitive eating have said, keep going, keep going. You're just going to start craving vegetables at some point, and this is all going to balance out again. And they've gained in their mind a lot of weight. And then they've got to a point where I can't do this intuitive eating thing anymore. And the way I've explored this with people and the way I think about it is that sometimes this permission to eat whatever you want whenever you want, when food is a very emotional or is perhaps your emotional crutch, that becomes permission to numb as opposed to just permission to eat. So you still feel trapped. It still feels like a compulsion, but every time you have this urge and this compulsion, you're saying to yourself, well, I'm not supposed to be restricting, so therefore I need to obey this compulsion. And I think that's where some people are feeling a bit jaded by the intuitive eating thing, because a lot of the bigger popular accounts about intuitive eating tend to be thin, white, young, cis women.
Yeah. I don't know how the coaching is happening inside of that, but I think for me, I have my intuitive eating counselor certification, and part of it, I suppose part of it is informed by my experience too, but intuitive eating in its actual form addresses emotional eating and taking food away from that emotional expression. It's separating that. And part of that often involves setting boundaries. And that reflects back on an episode we talked about in the beginning of our podcast, which is sometimes part of the treatment plan for someone who is having that experience where we need more boundaries. And again, this will ripple effect to other ways in our life that we're not setting boundaries many times. And that it's about learning to do that, to honor ourselves. This is a both ends of the spectrum thing. I think for intuitive eating, the way I teach it is that it's about giving permission to eat foods. And it's also about giving permission to not use food as a coping tool all the time. And that it's getting to feel the feelings and being able to say no to food as much as we can say yes to food in a way that serves us best, whatever that looks like. It's not about controlling, it's about supporting, but it's also not about indulging to the point of self-abuse. And that's part of this. That's part of what intuitive eating really is. But I know that message can get muddled.
So then, will boundaries help me lose weight, Steph?
Oh gosh. Why are
put
the
enough boundaries in? Can I use
but
boundaries in a way to make me lose weight?
But what are the boundaries for? Are the boundaries to lose weight, or is it to feel your feeling, to not use food as a crutch? What's the point? I think the goal is important. What's the point of the boundary?
Yeah, exactly that. I'm just teasing you, which
Gosh, Sarah.
Did you take me really seriously then?
I did. No, I didn't. It's like, now I have to answer and explain it.
If you get the questions in early, you get to do less talking.
Noted.
Speaking of which.
Yes. All right. Well,
was there something else you wanted to say?
No, I think we covered a lot of bases, and I'm sure there's more bases to cover, but
always.
That's all we have time for this week. So if anyone has any further questions or follow-up questions, please write in and let us know. And otherwise, Sarah, I will see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Thank you, Steph.
All right, bye, guys.
Like you were running out of that episode then. It's like, get me out of here.
I also have to pee my pants. So I was like, I feel like I actually have to go. I can't answer this. I have to go to the bathroom.